Well, welcome to another Memphis drawing as we continue our journey through the 200 drawing prompt book. Today's prompt is famous sign. And we went with Winston Churchill's famous V for victory sign during World War II. If you want to see how we did it, stay tuned. Today's prompt is famous sign. Now, I thought about several famous signs. Of course, the first one I thought about was the famous Hollywood sign, but I discarded that one as too obvious. Another famous sign I considered was the famous Welcome to Fabulous Las Vegas sign. Another sign I considered is, everybody's seen this, the at the Pioneer Club and Casino in Las Vegas, this neon cowboy that kind of moves. It's kind of animated, and that's picked up on a lot of things. So that's a famous sign. But I decided to go with an even more famous sign, and that is Winston Churchill, after he became prime minister, flashed this sign here, the victory sign, with his right hand right here. So I got this grainy photograph here, and we're going to try to do our interpretation of it. Forgot to mention that Winston Churchill now brings our total of celebrities to 19. I don't know why that's important. It isn't important. What am I saying? Why is it important? Of course it's not important. No one said it was important. Churchill was for you, if we have any younger people listening, Winston Churchill was the Prime Minister of Great Britain during the Second World War. He kind of came to fame because he predicted that Hitler, who was, everybody knows who Hitler was, he predicted that Hitler was a great danger to world peace, and he was, and Churchill was against appeasement, but Chamberlain, who was the prime minister, and other countries, they kind of gave in to Hitler, and they actually split up Czechoslovakia, which they didn't own, and gave their part to and gave it to Germany. You know, I don't know how that could possibly happen, but it did. And remember, this is only 20 years after World War II or World War I. And nobody wanted another war, except maybe Hitler. So people were, politicians were keen to do just about anything they could to keep from going to war. Well, Churchill said that was a bad policy, that he didn't want to go to war either. But appeasing Hitler to stave off war was a bad idea. And of course, he turned out to be right. So when the Germans attacked Poland in September 1939, that means that Chamberlain was out and they needed a new prime minister. Well, they weren't real excited about it. Especially the leadership. But they finally selected, parliaments work different. The party in charge, call them, is the majority or the compromise, the coalition party, the party in charge. They select the prime minister, and so as long as they keep their majority, they stay in power. Well, when you have multiple parties, that sounds like a pretty stable system, but what happens is a couple of parties party can get together with another party and call for a no confidence vote and kick the prime minister out. And I'm not sure that ever happened to Chamberlain. I think he just resigned when the Nazis invaded Poland, because he had to take some of the blame for that. So Chamberlain takes over, and England is really, they're almost broke. They're almost broke. They're on an island. they're not even self-sufficient in food, and certainly not in ammunition and implements of war. So anyway, after Germany invaded Poland, and incidentally, Stalin, who ended up being our ally in the Second World War in the Soviet Union, they invaded Poland from the other side. Soviet Union under Stalin was in cahoots with Hitler. He wanted Eastern Europe, and he would leave Western Europe to Hitler. So when they invaded, England was obligated under they had a treaty obligations with Poland. So England or Great Britain declared war on Germany. And Churchill became prime minister. Well, that started what was known as the phony war, because for a long time nothing happened. And if Hitler had not continued in his aggression, he might have got away with it, because everybody remembering the First World War. The First World War didn't want another one, especially not now, because by 1939 and 1940, airplanes had gotten a lot better. Ships had gotten a lot better. Machine guns had gotten a lot better. But the deal is, Hitler and Germany really, at this point, weren't ready weren't ready for war. They had invaded the Rhineland, which was a demilitarized zone between Germany and France. But even that, they weren't really ready for it. It's just that the Allies, who weren't allies then, they were just onlookers. Let them do it. Now Churchill was, his mother was American. So he kind of had that tie with America. And he was appealing to Roosevelt for aid. But America wasn't having it. Roosevelt knew that war was coming and had started a rearmament program which ended the Depression, the economic depression that started around 1930. But this phony war gave Churchill time to get make friends with Roosevelt. A couple times they met at sea, and at one point Roosevelt went to Washington. I don't know exactly when it was. It might have been during the phony war, and stayed at the White House. And people were expecting famous Winston Churchill shows up, and people were kind of expecting some kind of a hero. And what they got was a fella that looked so dowdy and ordinary, it was hard to believe he was inspirational. But he was dogged. So finally, Roosevelt, he figured out a way to help Great Britain without breaking our neutrality and getting around Congress's reluctance to provide any money. Now Roosevelt wanted to help, but Roosevelt was, we don't think of him that way, but was a master politician, which drove Eleanor's wife crazy. She was, she was a justice fighter. She was out there, she was out there fighting for women's rights and children's rights and minority rights and everything else. And it got so bad that that finally she had to have an inbox. Roosevelt didn't want to spend all his time talking to Eleanor, so she would have to leave notes in his inbox. Which I thought was hilarious. But anyway, Roosevelt figured out, the people just were absolutely against war. Majority of Americans. There was an active Nazi party in America. They had rallies and Nazi salutes and the whole thing. It was a large German population. But people were okay with a military buildup, so he started that. Or he got Congress to authorize money for it. They were okay with that because that meant jobs. That was fine. But they didn't want to send Americans overseas in any kind of war. So the problem was, Churchill here, he had another problem. It wasn't just that America wouldn't help him, couldn't help him politically, but he didn't have any money to buy anything either because they were broke. So what Roosevelt came up with was the famous Lend-Lease Act, where the Americans loaned military equipment to Britain, and with the supposed notion that they would pay it back later, after the war was over, which was the stupidest thing ever. No one ever expected that to happen, but it wasn't to sell it. Roosevelt had to get something out of the deal too. I mean, Roosevelt would have just sent them the material and let it be, but sell it to Congress, he had to sweeten the deal. So there were some trades. I mean, not trade. Some deals where America got to use some British territory. I don't remember where it was. I think I mean, it was a sticking point in Britain that America had kind of played extorted Britain into into this Lend-Lease Act, but Britain didn't have any choice. They had to have these ships and airplanes and guns and so forth. So they got them. And the and then what happened next, of course, is that the phony war turned into a real war. Britain bombed something of some German facility, probably by mistake, because Britain wasn't ready to fight anyway. And one thing led to another, and the Blitz started, which was an attack on bombing of Britain. And of course, in the meantime, Hitler took over Austria, then invaded, which was his home country. Then he invaded France. France Britain had troops in France, and they were all defeated. And of course, Churchill couldn't believe they gave up so easy. And the Germans drove the French army and the British expeditionary force to a place called Dunkirk. And this one of the places Churchill's leadership really came to play. He mobilized hundreds of ships, fishing boats, yachts, military craft, and sent them to Dunkirk to rescue the British and the French that had been run into the sea. It was one of those tactical errors that Hitler made. he delayed making a final attack on Dunkirk. I don't remember why, but he could have destroyed the bulk of the British Army, good part of them, right there and then. But he delayed, and Churchill was able to evacuate the British and the French from Dunkirk. So he saves his bulk of his army, which he gets credit for. But now, Britain is alone on their island, running out of food, not enough ammunition, and there's still rumblings from the politicians that perhaps Britain ought to negotiate with Hitler. Well, not Churchill. He's not going to have any part of that. And so they don't. Then the Battle of Britain starts, which is an air battle where the Luftwaffe sends over bombers to flatten and demoralize the Brits in preparation for a amphibious assault on the on Great Britain, because now Germany is in control of all of Western Europe. So they going to soften up. Going to soften up Britain, destroy their industries, destroy their air power, and the whole thing. And of course, it doesn't work. All it does is strengthen the resolve of the Brits, and the Brits have, I don't know if we have anything like this anymore, but they had radar. They had the latest radar of the period, so the Brits would know when the Germans were attacking with their bombers, and the Brits would send up fighters in the the losses were tremendous. I mean, they lost a lot. But the Germans lost more. And they also had listening posts. That's what I mean. I don't think we have anything like that anymore. These giant dish-looking things pointed towards Germany that would actually listen for the sound of motors. So that went on for quite a long time. And then unbelievably, Hitler attacked the Soviet Union. And I say unbelievably because Stalin was big friends with Hitler. Stalin was in cahoots with Hitler. You know, Stalin was a bigger criminal as, well, I don't think he was as bad as Hitler, but he was just about as bad. And he was, he was supplying the raw materials, and and they were splitting up Europe, and it was a good time for everybody. But thinking that Hitler had given up on invading, after a while he gave up on invading Britain because he finally figured out just how that's a pretty tough operation, trying to, Allies, we did, during Overlord, but the Germans didn't have anywhere near that kind of capability. So Hitler thought that Britain was pretty much defeated and were no longer a threat. Figured that Germany, or that the United States, was run by Hollywood and the Jews and all, they were just softies, could never do anything. So he decided to invade Russia. Well, that was such a stupid idea. That even Hitler's generals were telling him it was a stupid idea. But then the invasion went so well that Hitler looked like a genius, because it went so well. It went so well because Stalin wasn't ready for an attack by Germany. When he was told about it, he didn't believe him. He actually delayed his response when he heard about the attack. He just couldn't believe that Hitler would be that stupid. And then he could, then Stalin just, you know, Russia was, Soviet Union's, 10 times bigger than Germany. Population was doubled, was twice as much as Germany. They had a lot more natural resources in Germany. Had unlimited oil, gas, fuel. So anyway, the Germany attacks Soviet Union. Meantime, they're also bombing Britain. And then, and America's kind of staying out of it, but we are rearming. Then on December 7th, 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. And that put America at war with Japan. And a couple days later, Germany declared war against the United States. And I don't remember exactly what he said, but as I said, he had an American mother, he had some American ties, and he knew that the war was all but won, that a lot of people were going to die, and there was going to be a lot of suffering. But the war was won as soon as America got in it. And so it was. And that's kind of the end of the story. Unbelievably. And I was even amazed at this little fact. At the end of the war, they had elections in Britain. And Winston Churchill lost. And when I first heard about that when I was a kid, I was like, that's amazing. How can such a war hero have lost an election? But he did. And he ended up dying sometime in the 1960s. He was 89 years old, I think. Okay. Well, our prompt was victory sign, and there's hardly any sign that's or the prompt is famous sign, and I don't think there's any more sign that's more famous than the V for victory sign that was embraced by Winston Churchill during World War II in their lone fight against the Germans. Okay, let's see what our prompt is for tomorrow. It is Rastafarian. Hope to see you then.